Assumption about yielding the floor to me, but I'm happy to take it if the senator is done. Madam President, I wanted to come down today, as I did yesterday, to talk about this incredible opportunity that we have before us with this bipartisan immigration bill that we are considering now in the United States Senate in regular order in the United States Senate. And I hope that we have a process on the floor, now that we're here, that mirrors the one that the Judiciary Committee had, an open process where people can offer amendments that they care about, one that has a spirited debate on a variety of important issues, so the American people can have the benefit of a fully transparent and deliberative process over these important issues. In the Judiciary Committee process alone, over 300 amendments were filed and 200 were considered, and over 140 of them were actually adopted by the committee, and that's the way this place ought to work. And I think it'll strengthen this bipartisan bill to continue to take other people's ideas. What we didn't do in the Judiciary Committee, and what I hope we won't do on the floor, is accept amendments that will disrupt a very carefully negotiated balance in the so-called Gang of Eight or Group of Eight, 4 Democrats and 4 Republicans who worked hard together to try to get to a place that could actually work. And today there's been a lot of talk, and over the past few days, about the border security issues, and the border in particular, and preventing future waves of immigration. And I didn't come down here to negotiate any particular amendments or to litigate any particular amendments. I did want to give a little bit of context of where we arrived in the Group of Eight on this issue. The bill, as written, makes very serious investments, takes major steps to secure our borders. And I have to say the work was informed most principally by 2 border senators, John McCain and Jeff Flake, both Republicans representing the great state of Arizona. And as they have pointed out, and as we have pointed out, we actually, contrary to some of the rhetoric around this place, we've actually made a lot of progress over the last decade. It's not perfect, but we've moved in the right direction. As you can see, Madam President, from this chart, in 2012 alone, our expenditure on border security and immigration enforcement, this is before this bill that we're talking about now that makes more investments in border security. Our investment exceeded $17.7 billion. That's what the American people spent on border security, which is 23% higher. Just on border security, that is 23% higher than the $14 billion we spend on all the other federal law enforcement agencies combined. I think that would surprise the American people to know that. This is what we spent on the border security. Here's the Border Patrol, here's ICE, together about $17 billion, a little more than that. That's more than we spent on the FBI, the DEA, the Secret Service, the U.S. Marshals Service, the ATF, all of those law enforcement agencies, all of them combined in 2012 before we passed the law that's in front of us. That's what we spent protecting the border. And to hear some people around here talk about it, you'd think none of that money had made a difference. You'd think none of the increased border agents have made a difference. Well, as of January 2013, the U.S. Border Patrol had 21,370 agents in total, 18,000 of whom are on the southwest border. That is an increase from 1980 that represents a 9-fold increase. It's 9 times the number of agents we had. We had roughly 2,000 in 1980, and today we've got roughly 21,000, and that might be a reason why border crossings are down as much as they are. In fact, we're at about net zero this year in terms of people coming across our southern border and leaving. Now, there's still areas on the borders where we need to do more, like in Arizona's Tucson sector. And Senator McCain and Senator Flake were kind enough to take some of us down to the border to see what was really happening, to understand the topography down there, the difficulty of building a fence from one end of our border to the other. There are places where fences have been incredibly effective, like in San Diego. There are other places we're going to need other technology to be able to secure our borders in an efficient and thoughtful manner. And I have been guided, and I hope others that have concerns in this area will meet with these border senators and listen to what they have to say about how we can improve the situation on the southern border. What our bill calls for, in addition to the increases in resources, is that within 6 months of the bill passing, the Secretary of Homeland Security is required to develop and submit to Congress a comprehensive border strategy and fencing strategy. We appropriate in this bill $4.5 billion. In addition to this money that you saw up here, $14.5 billion for these strategies. And the goal of this plan is to achieve persistent surveillance and 90% effectiveness rate at certain high-traffic border areas. This is places in the border where lots of people try to get into the United States. Madam President, I can tell you I've seen it with my own eyes when Senator McCain took us down there. We actually saw somebody come across the border. We saw somebody climb the fence while we were standing right there. I have a photograph of it on my cell phone, and that person was apprehended within about 30 seconds of getting across the border. It shows you that it is an issue that we need to continue to manage, but it's good news that we've seen the improvement that we've seen. And I think these goals will be met. I'm convinced by the conversations I've had with Homeland Security and with others that the objectives that we have laid out to create this 90% effectiveness rate in the high-traffic areas is achievable. And it's achievable with the technologies that we propose. And if there are changes that can be made during this discussion to improve that, I'm all for that. But if the goals aren't met, you know, people say, well, you say it's going to happen. What if it doesn't happen? Here's what happens. In 5 years, if it hasn't happened, the Southern Border Security Commission will be established to make further recommendations about how it is we can secure the border with representation from the border states themselves. We appropriated another $2 billion in this bill for the Commission's recommendations if, in fact, we ever have to get to the Commission, which I hope that we won't, and I expect that we won't. Now, I've heard people say that one of the big problems with this bill is that it's just like 1986 all over again. I wasn't here in 1986, so I can't take the credit or the blame for what happened in 1986, but it is a serious critique and a reasonable critique of that bill, that it didn't do anything to stop future flow of immigrants and illegal immigration in this country. That is a very fair critique. It's not a fair critique of our bill, because our bill deals with the border security that I talked about, as well as internal security measures in the United States of America that were completely absent in the 1986 effort. This bill includes a universal E-Verify system, and we crack down on employers who hire undocumented workers. That alone will reduce dramatically the incentive of people to cross the border illegally if they know that all across America, small businesses can run their biometric card or other ID through a database that tells them whether they're here lawfully or not, and in an instant know whether they're here lawfully or not, instead of engaging in this game that's been played for decades in this country where people with false security cards are able to come in and get a job, and then a year later or 18 months later the employer finds out the Social Security card is no longer available. That is going to dramatically disincentivize people from crossing the border. And the small business owners I know are very happy with this, because they're tired of being the immigration police. They're tired of feeling like they went the extra mile to figure out whether somebody was here lawfully or not, and relied on a Social Security card that looked perfectly valid with a valid Social Security number, only to find out that 18 months later that they had hired somebody that was undocumented. They're so weary of this, which is why they're expecting the Congress to finally do its job and fix this broken immigration system. You know, the comparison to 1986 is unfair in many ways. And Mark Everson, who's a former Deputy Commissioner at the Immigration and Naturalization Service, who oversaw the implementation of the 1986 law, wrote today, just today in the Washington Post, quote, "In contrast, the legislation before the Senate today takes a comprehensive approach. In contrast to 1986, this legislation takes a comprehensive approach. Demand for unauthorized workers can be dampened, but only through adequate attention to the workplace and interior enforcement. If anything, he wrote, I would accelerate the rollout of the E-Verify system while helping to secure the borders faster. And I hope we can accelerate the E-Verify system. And the reason is I've heard from employers who say, you know what, we're playing by the rules. We're making sure that we don't hire undocumented people for our construction business. But there are other people down the road that are paying lower wages to people that are here unlawfully, and that's an unfair disadvantage for us. And I agree with that. I think the question about how fast we can implement E-Verify needs to be balanced against the inconvenience that we pose to businesses as they get up to speed on the new system, but that's certainly something that we can talk about. Finally, you know, we have, among many other broken parts of this system, a broken entry-exit visa system in the United States. I think it would shock the American people. It surprised me to learn that of the 11 million people that are here, 40% of them are people that entered the country lawfully. They entered the country on a visa, but they overstayed their visa. And we have the ability in this great country of ours in the 21st century to somehow detect when people are coming in on a visa, but we haven't bothered to figure out when people are leaving, which doesn't make a lot of sense given the fact that the technology is available. This bill finally includes a mandatory and operational biographic entry and exit system to track those coming to the United States and those leaving the United States of America, and miraculously, finally, we're going to actually know who's coming in and out of the country. As we begin to phase in a biometric system that will build upon the other efforts being taken to track visitors in a way that's cost-effective, we are going to become more secure. We will finally know who's in this country and who should be asked to leave the United States of America. So, in my view, border security is not a reason to obstruct this bill. And as I said earlier, we're open to changes. But we already have very strong border measures in this bill. I don't want that to be overlooked. And I think when people hear that we need to spend billions and billions and billions of dollars more, they should know that we're already spending billions of dollars down there. Some of it's been effective, some of it's not been effective. I say let's do what's effective, let's not do what's ineffective, and let's not overspend at a time when we've got the budget issues that we are facing. In conclusion, Mr. President, as the USA Today editorial board has written, unlike 1986's political sleight of hand, it's not a lot of love lost for the 1986 bill, as you can probably tell. Unlike 1986's political sleight of hand, this year's legislation is a tough, credible plan for preventing a new surge of illegal immigration. A quest for unattainable perfection should not be allowed to undo the good that it would achieve. I wish I could say this was a place that let the perfect be the enemy of the good. We seldom even get to the good. But in this case, I think we've gotten to a place that's very good, and that we should move together forward as we have to this point in a bipartisan way to craft a thoughtful solution to a broken system that continues to be a drag on the economy of the state of Colorado and the economy of the United States of America. This law, if we pass this law, we will once again reaffirm a couple of things that makes the United States so special. One, that we subscribe to the rule of law. There are a lot of countries in the world where that's not true, and it's one of the principal reasons that people want to come to the United States, because it's a place where you can live up to your talents, because nobody can take it from you, because we subscribe to the rule of law. People want to come from all over the world. It's a great compliment to our country to build their businesses here and to help us grow our economy. And it will reaffirm as well the very important notion that we are a nation of immigrants, generation after generation, going back to the founding of this great country of ours. That is who we are. And if we get this bill past the Senate, we get this bill past the House, I think we'll have done something very important for this generation of Americans, but also for the people that are coming after us. And with that, Mr. President, I thank you for your patience, and I yield the floor. And note the absence of a quorum. Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander. including the Wounded Warriors Act, the Weapons Systems Acquisition Reform Act, and the first Military Commissions Act. In accordance with the committee's practice, we will use the sexual assault provisions reported by the Personnel Subcommittee as the vehicle for our markup. Once we have discussed these provisions and voted on amendments, I expect that we will have a roll call on the sexual assault legislative package as amended, if amended. After a short break, we will then return to our committee room to resume our normal markup procedures. Now, after I call on Senator Inhofe for his opening remarks, following our usual procedure, I'm going to turn then to Senator Gillibrand and to Senator Graham as the chairman and ranking member of the Personnel Subcommittee to present the sexual assault provisions that are included in the subcommittee mark. At that point, the sexual assault provisions in the mark will be open for discussion and amendment. I intend to offer an amendment on behalf of myself and others, including Senator Inhofe, McCaskill, McCain, Reed, Graham, Kane, Ayotte, and King. And this amendment will address the role of the chain of command in the prosecution of sexual assault offenses. Senator Inhofe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate your leadership as the committee begins its efforts to mark up the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2014. The purpose of our open session today is to discuss the various provisions contained within the Personnel Subcommittee mark that relate to combating sexual assault in our military. There is agreement among all of us that sexual assault is a cancer in our military. It undermines unit readiness and effectiveness, hurts morale, and breaks a sacred trust with the men and women who volunteer to defend our country. I commend my colleagues for their efforts to combat the scourge of sexual assault. However, I'm concerned by some of the provisions in the bill, particularly those that would severely restrict our commanders' authority under the Uniform Code of Military Justice to make decisions with input from their staff judge advocates to swiftly and fairly deal with the misconduct and to preserve readiness. I look forward to working closely with the members of this committee to ensure that we approach these important issues in a thoughtful and deliberate manner. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Senator Gillibrand, will you now present these sexual assault provisions of your mark?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. As you said, the Personnel Subcommittee met yesterday and adopted the Chairman's mark as amended as the subcommittee mark. I want to thank you for holding this open session. The Personnel Subcommittee mark was held in open session yesterday, and it's appropriate that this very important legislation be marked up in open session. The provisions in this mark comprehensively address the issue of sexual assaults in the military. The provisions include, from the Military Justice Improvement Act, a provision that would establish new JAG 06 disposition authority, and a new separate convening authority for serious offenses, except for specified military unique offenses. It removes the character of the accused from Rule 306 of the Rules for Court-Martial as a factor a commander could consider in deciding how to dispose of an offense. And it requires commanders to report allegations of sexual-related offenses to criminal investigation organizations for investigation. It includes provisions from the Military Justice Improvement Act, a bill offered by Senator McCaskill, Shaheen, Kane, and Klobuchar, a provision that would amend Article 60 of the UCMJ to prohibit convening authorities from changing findings for certain serious offenses and requires written explanation for changes in sentences. From a bill offered by Senators Klobuchar and Murkowski, a provision that would express the sense of the Senate that rape, sexual assault, and forcible sodomy offenses should be tried by court-martial. It requires that the disposition of substantiated sexual-related offenses be noted in personnel records of the offenders, and requires the retention of forms regarding both restricted and unrestricted reports for 50 years. From a bill offered by Senators Murray, Ayotte, and Blumenthal, provisions that would require all military departments to establish special victims counsel, enhance responsibilities for DoD Sexual Assault Prevention and Response Office, require the Secretary of Defense to submit proposed legislation to prohibit sexual acts and contacts between military instructors and trainees, and ensures the availability of sexual assault response coordinators for members of the National Guard and Reserve. From a bill offered by Senators McCaskill and Klobuchar, a provision that would require the comprehensive review of training, qualifications, and experience of individuals responsible for the sexual assault prevention and response programs. The mark also includes a provision that would amend the military whistleblower protection statute to require inspectors general to investigate allegations of reprisals for reporting sexual assaults. Finally, yesterday the subcommittee markup, we adopted 6 amendments related to the issue of sexual assault, including a Shaheen amendment requiring the independent panel on sexual assault in the military to report in a year instead of 18 months, a Shaheen, Fisher, and Udall amendment improving requirements for selection and assignment of sapper billets, a McCaskill amendment requiring additional duties for the independent panel on sexual assault in the military, a Blumenthal amendment requiring the independent panel of judicial proceedings under the UCMJ to address victim compensation, a Blumenthal amendment extending crime victims' rights to victims of offenses under the UCMJ, and a Udall amendment, number 153 as modified, which would express the sense of the Senate regarding discharges in lieu of court-martial for sexual offenses. Now, I want to thank my colleagues for their absolute determination to stamp out the scourge of sexual assaults in the military that are truly undermining our military readiness. And there are so many.
Excuse me, Mr. President. Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent to end the quorum call.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. And now I come to the Senate floor to strongly urge consideration and passage of the first of several amendments I'll be presenting on this so-called comprehensive immigration reform bill. It's numbered 1228, and it's about the U.S. visit system, the entry-exit system that is supposed to be in place, has been mandated by Congress many times to guard against visa overstays, which is a serious national security problem. Mr. President, why is this important? Well, there's one simple way to underscore that, to answer that question, and that is to remind us that the 9/11 terrorists, every single one of them, were visa overstays. There are dangerous people who came into our country on valid visas and then who overstayed their visas, who plotted against us, and who ultimately caused horrendous death and destruction on 9/11. What do we do about that situation? Well, we need a system of tracking visas who come into the country and then tracking when they should be leaving the country and looking to see if they have exited the country. We need a system which has biometric data associated with it, which can track those entrances and those exits. That sort of system is technologically possible. It's definitely possible to fund and put in place. It's primarily a question of political will. And unfortunately, even after Congress mandating this multiple times to no effect, even after 9/11 and other terrorist attacks, we haven't mustered the political will to demand that this is in place. If 9/11 wasn't enough, the 9/11 Commission, which we appointed, put into law, asked to look at the horrible attack of 9/11 and give us recommendations. The 9/11 Commission put this as one of their top recommendations. And their specific recommendation was that, quote, the Department of Homeland Security, properly supported by Congress, should complete as quickly as possible a biometric entry-exit screening system, close quote. Again, Mr. President, Congress had talked about this years before, starting in 1996. Congress passed that mandate. Congress repeated that mandate many different times, over 17 years, 6 additional votes. The 9/11 Commission said the tragedy of 9/11 was in part due to our not having that system. Congress, the administration, you need to get this done, and still that important piece of border security is not in place. And so, Mr. President, this Vitter Amendment number 1228 is very, very simple. It will prohibit the implementation of any program granting temporary legal status in this bill or adjusting legal status who's presently in our country unlawfully until this U.S. visit system has been fully implemented, full implementation. So no change in anybody's legal status happens until we finally, after decades, implement this U.S. visit system, until we finally, after years, heed the recommendation on the 9/11 Commission, until we finally, decades after 9/11, say this will never happen again. And under this legislation, under my amendment, both houses of Congress must pass a joint resolution of approval that, yes, this is fully in place. Because, quite frankly, there isn't sufficient trust of just the administration saying so, just some certification from any administration, not just this one, anyone. It has to happen, and Congress has to say, yes, that is in place. And then that change in legal status can go forward. Mr. President, we talk a lot about border security. And, of course, usually we focus on the southern border for obvious reasons. That's where the numbers are. That's where the greatest flow is. But when it comes to national security, this is a vital component of enforcement. This is a vital component of border security. And we need to get this right. We need to remember 9/11. We need to heed the recommendation of the 9/11 Commission. It's been 1996 since we, Congress, has mandated this. We need to make it stick. And the only way to make it stick in the context of this bill is to demand that it is done, it is completed, verified, including by Congress, before any change in legal status happens. Thank you, Mr. President. In closing, Mr. President, I also wanted to express strong concern and opposition to the Leahy Amendment number 1183, which is currently on the floor and up for consideration. That amendment would really grant exceptional priority and exceptional favor to particular O&P visa applications, which are generally for renowned professors, researchers, doctors, Oscar winners, entertainers, performers. And it would specifically waive a fee associated with this visa. I think that's problematic because we depend on all of these fees to fund this system and this enforcement system which we're trying to improve. I find it ironic that we would waive this fee on that class of individuals who are absolutely the most well-heeled and the most capable of paying it. So it would give them special status and a waiver of a relatively modest fee for them and hurt the funding of the entire enforcement system. I think that is misguided. When we're trying to build up enforcement, when we're trying to get this done and pay for all that enforcement, I think it's misguided to waive this fee for exactly the sort of visa applicants who are most in a position to pay it. With that, Mr. President, I yield the floor. Mr. President, suggest the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.
A quorum call on the floor of the Senate as senators have been working on amendments to the immigration bill. The measure would boost border security and workplace enforcement and allow tens of thousands of new high and low-skilled workers into the country. It also would create a 13-year path to citizenship for the 11 million immigrants in the country illegally. And again, a number of amendments are being negotiated. We do expect further debate on immigration a little bit later as the Senate day continues. While this quorum call continues, we will go live now to the Senate Armed Services Committee as they are holding a markup on the fiscal year 2014 Defense Authorization Bill.
As chair of the Personnel Subcommittee, scheduled her first subcommittee hearing on this issue and has been a force for change in the months since. Senator McCaskill has devoted hours and hours to addressing the problem of sexual assault in the military and the mechanics of the military justice system and many other.
One of the things that I found intriguing and was glad to hear was that the bill sponsors this S-744, the Comprehensive Immigration Bill. Their sponsors indicated that they had a plan that would move us to a more merit-based system of immigration. They made that promise. It's something that I advocated in 2007, had the opportunity to meet with the chairman of the Canadian system in Canada and talk about their merit-based system. It's a very significant system, a major change in how they handled immigration in Canada. He was very, very pleased with it. Fundamentally, they sought to admit people into Canada who would have the best chance to be successful in Canada. They can't admit everybody in Canada. No other country that I know of has no limit on number of people that enter. So they wanted to say who could be the most successful, who would do the best, and could flourish in Canada. And so they gave points for people with more education, people who already speak English, people who have job skills Canada needs, younger people, and matters like that. And it was designed to serve the Canadian national interest. And it's been in place for a number of years now, and it actually works, and they are very happy with it. They would never go back. And so when I heard that this might be a part of the bill, I was pleased to hear that. And it's important to emphasize first, though, that this merit-based immigration is separate from the doubling of the guest workers that come in, because guest workers come under other categories, and I'm referring now to immigrants, people who come to the country with plans to stay permanently and eventually. And so those are real, what you call, immigrants. And so the merit-based system, as I understood it, was to focus on that group, rightly so. So the merit-based provisions don't include the temporary workers. They have their own categories. But when you actually review the bill, it's clear that this promise of a merit-based system is not met. The promise is just not met in any significant degree, and it's another example of the promoters of the legislation over-promoting and selling something that's popular, but when you read the bill, it's really not there. And so I want to talk about the legislation, go through it on this particular subject. The bill's 1,000 pages. It deals with quite a lot of issues, and each one of them are very important. The merit-based system has had almost no discussion in the process so far, and it needs to be discussed. And it's a reason, I believe, we'd be better off to have brought up pieces of legislation that deal with the characteristics of the people we would like to have enter the country in the future, to deal with the border security, to deal with the visa system, to deal with workplace enforcement, to deal with internal enforcement, individually and separately. But no, we've got this monumental 1,000-page bill with all kinds of things in it, and the sponsors say, we've taken care of this problem, we've taken care of border security, we've taken care of the visa system, and by the way, we've got a great plan. The system's going to be more merit-based now. Now, the proponents of the legislation have said the bill decreases annual family-based migration by reducing the cap on family-based visa systems. These are immigrants who come to the country based on relationship with people here. They say it would reduce that from 226,000 to 161,000. However, the bill actually increases overall family-based migration by allowing an unlimited number of visas each year for children and spouses of green card holders. It grows the number further by allowing the visas that would have gone to them under the old system to be used by other family-based applicants. The bill also does not change current law, which allows an unlimited number of family-based visas for parents of U.S. citizens each year. One of the largest and fastest growing chain migration categories is parents. According to the Department of Homeland Security yearbook statistics in 2012, 124,000 parents adjusted status to legal permanent residence in this country. Now, Canada does the opposite. Canada says Canada benefits more if we have young people come, they have a full working life, they pay into the pension plans, and then that's fine. That works well, but they give less points for older people for the very same reason. So this is a big increase we're seeing there. And the number of merit-based visas pale in comparison to the family-based visas under the bill. So the total number of merit-based visas in this category are much smaller than the family-based visas in this legislation. For example, the new merits section allows for up to $125,000 to $250,000 a year. So these are people that would apply and they would claim that they have certain merit qualities that justify being ranked higher on the list. Well, that's almost exactly the number of petitions that the U.S. Citizens and Immigration Service currently receives every year in just sibling and married sons and daughters family category policy. So the 250,000, the maximum number under the merit system, is almost exactly the same as the number of brothers and sisters and married sons and daughters in the family-based category. According to the liberal group, the Center for American Progress, the annual flow of family-based immigrants will be over 800,000. 3 times higher than the number of merit-based visas offered each year. The Migration Policy Institute notes that, quote, the Senate bill would lift numerical limits and increase the number of permanent visas issued on the basis of nuclear family ties. The Migration Policy Institute effectively and correctly notes this also, quote, the Senate bill would dramatically expand options for low and middle-skilled foreign workers to fill year-round, longer-term jobs and ultimately qualify for permanent residence, close quote. So this is a serious matter. Does the bill move to merit-based system, or does it dramatically expand immigration of low and middle-skilled foreign workers to fill long-term jobs and move to qualify for permanent residence? Well, I think there's no doubt about it. The Migration Policy Institute is correct in that analysis. It would be so good if we had moved a lot further in the merit-based system, but the bill just doesn't. The bill's proponents have also suggested the bill reduces chain migration by eliminating siblings, brothers and sisters, and married children categories from the family-based system. However, the bill awards points in the new merit system to siblings and married children, allowing the same chain migrants to receive merit-based visas ahead of many highly skilled and educated merit-based visa applicants. So what I'm saying there is that the merit-based system gives points, but it also gives points if you're relatives. You've got family here, a lot of points. The proponents of the bill argue that the merit-based system will ensure that more highly skilled and educated aliens will receive visas because the point system favors education, employment, and English proficiency. However, points are also allocated for non-merit-based factors, such as family ties, civic involvement, and by virtue of being an alien from a country which few aliens have immigrated from. That's sort of like the form of diversity visa. The merit-based visa system favors chain migrants over high-skilled and educated applicants by allocating more points to non-merit-based systems. Okay, so let's look at it. For example, an alien who wants to apply to the United States, who has a college degree, a 4-year bachelor's degree, they're given 5 points because they have more education. However, an alien who wants to come to the United States can also receive 5 points for simply being a national of a country from which few aliens have been admitted. You could have a high school diploma or not even a high school degree. 0 education requirement there to get 5 points. And 2, an alien who is a sibling of a citizen of the United States would receive the same amount of points as an alien with a master's degree, 10 points, and 5 more points than an alien with a college degree. So this brother or sister would also receive more points than an alien with 3 years of experience in an occupation requiring extensive preparation, such as a surgeon. So what I'm saying is, through a backdoor way, they've claimed they've got a merit system, but again, vast advantages are given based on family connections. So you could have a person, 2 people from Honduras, apply to come to the United States. One was valedictorian of his high school class, has a 4-year college degree, and speaks English, and is anxious to come to America and go to work. And we have another one who dropped out of high school, who doesn't speak English, and has not even a high school degree. Well, the one who had, if that one had a brother in the United States, he would be accepted before the more educated student, graduate. And I think that's wrong. In Tier 2, a brother or sister of a citizen would receive the same amount of points as an alien lawfully present and employed in the United States in an occupation that requires medium preparation, which could include air traffic controllers, commercial pilots, and registered nurses. But this is only a fraction of the chain family-based migration that will occur over the next 10 years under this legislation, because the 11 million illegal immigrants who are given green cards and even citizenship will be able to bring in their families as well over time. And they can be approved on a expedited basis. For example, there are an estimated 2.5 million who would benefit under the DREAM Act provisions of the legislation. If they came here as a child, they get accelerated process. They will be eligible for citizenship in 5 years, and then that 2.5 million will be able to bring their parents also. And DREAM Act beneficiaries will also be able to bring in an unlimited number without any caps on parents, spouses, children, and those spouses, children, and parents will get permanent legal status in an additional 5 years, and then will be eligible for citizenship in 10, and then they would be able to bring their parents also. An estimated 800,000 illegal agricultural workers today would become legal permanent residents, green card holders in 5 years, and will then be eligible to bring in an unlimited number of spouses and children. An estimated 8 million additional illegal immigrants who are here today that would be given legal status, including recent arrivals as little as December of 2011. And millions of visa overstay persons will receive legal status and work authorization. These 8 million will be able to bring in their relatives as soon as 10 years from now, and those relatives over time will be able to bring in spouses, children, and parents. What I would say is none of those would come in on a merit-based system. They're not depending on their education, not depending on their health. They would just be able to come under the rules that would be set forth in this bill. An estimated 4.5 million aliens awaiting employment and family-based visas on the current cap limitations. We've got 4.5 who've applied to come, but there are limits on how many people can come per year on the current law, and large parts of those caps and limits will be completely eliminated under the legislation. So an estimated 4.5 million that are waiting now outside of America, their time to come, will be cleared over a period of years, not subject to the family-based annual cap, thus freeing up room for more family-based migration that would be subject to an annual cap. So over the next decade, the bill would legalize well over 30 million applicants. Colleagues, we need to understand that. On the current law, our processes call for the legalization of 1 million people a year. We're the most generous nation in the world. But you've got to know that if this bill passes, we would be giving permanent legal status to 30 million people in the next 10 years. Over 2.5 million of those people would be through the new merit-based system. So out of 30, only 2.5 million would be admitted under the merit-based system. And even among those 2.5 million, many will be being admitted because they get extra points for being family members. But there is a larger issue here as well. Median income has declined in America since Congress last considered immigration reform. Income in America for working Americans has been declining. I hate to say it, but it's true. I've seen recent statistics. It's from 1999 to today. We've seen an 8% reduction in real take-home pay by working Americans. Some say for the last 30 years we've had a basic erosion of the salary base of working Americans. That's a very serious thing. Yet this bill roughly triples the annual flow of legal immigrants, largely low-skilled legal immigrants, not high-skilled college graduates, and doubles the flow of temporary guest workers, an entirely separate group from the one I've been talking about. Do my colleagues have any concerns about how this will impact the falling incomes of our middle-class American citizens? Has any thought been given to that? Has anybody considered that if we bring in more people than the economy can absorb, that this will create unemployment, place people on welfare and dependency, deny men and women the ability to produce an income sufficient to take care of their family, make them dependent on the state, because we just simply don't have enough jobs? Well, we don't have enough jobs now. That's absolute fact. We've got increase in unemployment this last month. We had a decline of 8,000 jobs in manufacturing. The bulk of the increases in jobs were in service industries like restaurants and bars and part-time workers. So we've got a serious problem here. And our colleagues need to be asking themselves, can I justify this kind of huge increase in immigration when we can't find jobs for current Americans? And what about the millions living in poverty today and chronically unemployed? What about the nearly almost 1 in 2 African-American teenagers who are unemployed today? And they need to get started in the workforce. But if they have to compete against somebody who came here on a work visa program who's 30 years of age, they don't have a chance to get started. who would be glad to work for a minimum wage or lower? Can one of the sponsors of this bill explain to me the economic justification for adding 4 times more guest workers than proposed in the bill in 2007? At a time when more than 4.6 million more Americans are out of work today than in 2007. Can one of the sponsors answer this basic question? How will this legislation protect struggling American workers? How will it help them? Oh, it may help some meat packer or some large agribusiness. They may get a gain from it, but will it help millions of middle-class working Americans who need a job, need a pay raise, need to be able to have a health care and a retirement benefit? I'm worried about that. We need to talk about that. Some people are talking about it on the outside, but it's almost not discussed within this chamber. Let me ask you, will the flowing of this many new workers, will it raise wages or reduce wages? Will it raise wages or reduce wages? Will it make it harder for a husband or a wife, a son or a daughter, a grandchild or a granddaughter to get a job at a decent wage? Wages have been going down. Unemployment is up. The lowest percentage of people in the workforce in America today since the 1970s. And how can we justify this? Somebody needs to talk about it. We've got people that are optimistic. They think we just bring in millions of people and somehow jobs will accrue. But it doesn't appear to be so. And who do we owe our loyalty to? Some business who would like to have more labor? Or to the American people who fight our wars, obey our laws, raise our children, and pay their taxes to this country when they're working and can pay taxes? Who's our loyalty to? We need to ask those questions. So, Mr. President, I would say that I appreciate the fact that the Gang of Eight has stated they believe in a merit-based kind of program that would bring in more people and convert our system from a low-skilled immigration to a higher-skilled immigration. Unfortunately, it makes far too little advancement in that regard. We can't accept such a meager alteration of our system. Canada went much further toward a merit-based system than we did, and that's what we need to do. And there are a lot of statistics out there that show that an immigrant who comes to America with 2 years of college or more, speaking English, does very well in our country. They tend to flourish, tend to do well financially, tend to pay more in taxes than they take out in revenue. But those that come with less skills and less advancement, the opposite is true. So it's obvious that the nation should seek to advance its national interest by welcoming more people who have the ability to be successful and flourish in our great country. I thank the chair and will yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from Mississippi.
Mr. President, I rise to continue this debate on one of the great issues of our time, the immigration bill that is before us, and I thank the ranking member, Mr. Grassley, for allowing me to jump ahead of him in the schedule. I have a markup in the Armed Services Committee